Hello. Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to be talking about, planning for the next year, putting a farm plan together, crop selection, ordering seeds, the whole business of how to get to the end of how much you want to harvest in the end and how much to plant and all that. With one of our farmers from the Keep Growing Detroit farm, Miss Molly Hubble. And we are really excited to have you out with us tonight. If you don't know me, my name is Keto. I coordinate our education programming along with one of our co-directors, Tafira Rushton. And just before we jump into the presentation for the day, I just want to put the word out that we are going to be having our end of the year Keep Growing Detroit celebration coming up on December 9th. It'll be on Zoom. It's a chance to just do a little sharing out, learn about some things coming up for the year and reflecting on this year a little bit. We did it last year on Zoom as well, and it was really fun. Zoom is kind of boring or not great all the time, but it was a fun event. So I encourage you to check that out. Information, I think that our e-newsletter will be going out probably tomorrow if it hasn't gone out already, with more information about that. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Miss Molly, and we'll go from there. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing. If you have questions while we are presenting today, please put them in the chat. I will be managing the chat, and I'll help get information to Molly to answer questions as we're going along. And then, if there's time towards the end, we can we can have people come off mute and have a little bit of an informal conversation. All right, let's go.
Cool. Well, hello, everybody. I am so happy to be doing this class again. For those of you just joining us, we were talking a minute ago about kind of the end of the season, and that we're pretty much there. Some of us may have some stuff growing in high tunnels or hanging on in high tunnels, or I can imagine some of you who do have high tunnels, you may have some things that you're trying to overwinter, but this is kind of the tail end of the season. So this is exactly when we encourage growers to kind of go inward and reflect and start to plan for next year. I personally am going to take this week before I launch into planning for next year, but it's coming up pretty soon. So this class has been a really good reminder to me to start looking at my notes year to see what I can do for next year. So this is 2022 farm planning.
Tell us about this picture, Molly.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was like, has everyone gotten a chance to see this? We'll talk in a minute about ways in which people design their farm plan, whether it's index cards or spreadsheets or, like pictures on their phone or an app that helps them. But this is a photo that I grabbed off the internet of a person's actual farm plan. So a physical farm plan, and it is made out of Legos. And I love that. I love that it's like physical and you can touch it and move the pieces around. And I continue to be a big Legos fan. So if I had that many Legos left in the house, I would do something similar. So you can see this person has all their beds and labeled with planting dates and different colors for different crops, and it's really cool. Have not seen, that's the first time I've seen that, so that was pretty sweet. Okay, cool. So I feel like I know why planning is important. I think we all know why it's important, but just to kind of reiterate its importance, Yeah, it for these reasons. So one, timing, it's important. So make sure that you do it in the winter at the end of the season. Um, and when you have this time to kind of like stop working, reflect, look backwards, look forwards. So this is the right time to be planning for your 2022 growing season. Um, with proper planning, you are able to kind of maximize productivity in your spaces. So instead of, kind of these like in the moment, just like, oh, we'll just, plant this here and plant this there. When you take the time beforehand to really lay out your space and look for planting windows and like, oh, maybe I have these, you start to see gaps and you start to see places where you can fit even more in, cycle things through faster in your farmer garden. So if you take this time now, you're able to, in general, get more out of your space. And it also takes the burden off of your mind and body in the moment. I know that I rarely have time to do much more than, plant, harvest, and maybe take a couple like records, but critical thinking time in August, not very much of that available. So take this time when you do have, all the mental capacity and like you're relaxed, to do that now to reduce stress and confusion during the growing season. And also, if you're taking good records during the season, you're able to kind of identify those things that you need to improve upon, like, oh, shoot, what was my like watering schedule like? How does this work with my like, 9 to 5 job? Like, what are some things I need to tweak? So keeping those records during the season and then implementing them into your project plan ultimately helps you become a more like in tune, more mindful farmer. And also it's the more you plan now, every year after that, it gets easier and easier. Like you're just tweaking things. And even I was saying, like, I've taught this class now for, a couple years, a few times. And every time I teach this class, I'm able to reflect on my notes from the last class and fine tune it, and prep for this gets easier and easier. And so does a farm plan. So I encourage you all to do it. And what are the rewards of farm planning? We kind of just said this, or I just kind of said this, but better time management, absolutely. It's one less thing that you have to think about, oh, what was I going to plant after I took out, the spring crops? If you already have it worked into your plan, you're just rocking and rolling, you're on autopilot, which is great. And maxing out productivity in your spaces, you're also able to, if you're selling, if you're a market gardener, you're able to, earn more because you're turning over beds faster, you're producing more. I am all for reducing as much stress and confusion during the season as possible. Of course, we're talking about continuous improvement and we're never going to get rid of stress, but with a good plan, hopefully it's a less stressful growing season. And this is a big thing that I'm going to drive home in a little bit when we get to, my case study for tonight. With a good plan, you're able to work towards consistency in what you're growing and your weekly, monthly offerings. And this is really important if you are at all thinking about offering a CSA, so a community supported agriculture type model where you grow things for, a number of members that you support with your produce. And you're kind of like indebted to them for a certain amount of crops at a certain time. So that really does take kind of a higher level of planning in order to pull off. And this is really the way that you're able to bring consistently like something, a root crop, a salad crop, something else, those 5 or 6 items per week for something like a CSA program. But in general, like consistency is always something we want to strive for. So you do that by having a really, really nailed down planting plan and following it. And again, say this a million times, but start a plan today. next year, it's going to be easier and easier to repopulate and just tweak that plan going forward. So planning really does get easier and easier. Great. Cool. So now we're going to talk about the steps. So what's involved in planning? And I kind of want to just start by saying this is how my brain approaches the process of planning. It works for me because of the types of market outlets that we do. So at KGD Farm, we have Saturday market plus the CSA program, plus we have the online store. So this flow really works when you have already identified your market outlets. So I already know what I'm growing for. I'm growing for 50 CSA members, June through November. I'm growing for a potential 40 orders a week through our online store. And actually, these are real numbers. Like this is coming straight out of my project plan for next year. So when you already have your market outlets in mind, this is kind of what those steps kind of look like, or at least this is my version of that. For those of you who are going from kind of the reverse, where you're like, I want to plant all of these things because I enjoy them or because my family likes them, but I don't know, maybe I'll sell, or like maybe I'll give some of this away to my like local soup kitchen or church or like neighbors. Some of these steps may be tweaked, where it's a little more open-ended. But for the purpose of this class, I'm really going to be speaking to like a planning process where you already know your market outlets and you're planning for those market outlets. So I hope that's clear. So how do we begin? So the first thing I do when I'm planning, and I'm going to go into these in more detail with a case study, but it always starts with taking all of the little pieces of paper, all the notes, the notebooks, your receipts from people you've sold to, your seed order from last year, if you place them, empty seed packets. I keep them around so that I can like look at them at the end of the season. So bundle up all of that stuff and review it, look at it, see what worked. Some things will kind of like shake out when you start to like look at your notes from last year in this season. And from that, you can start to set these kind of high level goals for yourself. Specifically, like, what are my personal goals for next year? What are my production goals for next year? And then what are my my kind of like profit, like if profit is tied to your goal setting, like how much money do I want to make, is a good way to set your intention.
Holly?
Yeah.
So just wondering, like, can you give an example of what like a production goal would be without, I mean, that's a result of looking at your crop out, your market outlets, right? Or your, okay.
Yeah. So, and I'll have an example of this. So, so maybe for like a backyard gardener, it could be that one of your production goals is to, maybe you have developed a new space, or you've added space to your garden. Maybe you've added another raised bed. Maybe a production goal is to kind of like activate and use that new space. Maybe it's to, if you only went to one market, or only gave produce to like one of your neighbors, maybe it's to grow to the point where you are going to market more regularly or during different months. Maybe it's that you've never tried to grow leeks or onions or winter squash because of your space, and you're trying to work that into your plan. So if there was like a crop that this is actually where I started. If there was a crop last year that you ended up buying more in the grocery store during the season, because like you weren't growing it, maybe a production goal for you would be to fold that into your plan this year and kind of study it and use it as kind of a production goal for yourself. For myself, for example, it's to increase the amount that I'm producing for the CSA program across certain crops. So that I'm instead of bringing, random carrots, I'm bringing a regular amount of carrots. So that's one of my production goals that we'll get to in a minute. Does that make sense, Keto?
Yep, thank you.
Cool. So set goals for yourself. And in terms of personal goals, I feel like the one that, sits at the top of my list is always kind of don't overcommit yourself, don't overexert. And then if you start with that and you just keep kind of kicking that around in your head, you'll end up with a plan that hopefully in mind all the way through. So, and also another personal goal for me in 2022 is to actually enjoy my space more often. So I think of it as a production space, but I'd love to think of it more as like a place where I can just like go to relax and not think about work too. So setting personal goals for your space, also important. Okay, first two steps. Next step, choose your crop mix. So many ways that this can be done. Choosing your crop mix for myself and at KGD Farm happens because we get customer survey feedback and a lot of feedback from market that says we want to see more peppers or less carrots. No one ever says that, but more winter squash, less of this. So we take all that information that we got from the season and then we use that to create a crop mix. But if you're just starting out, choose what you love. If you really love tomatoes, make sure there's space for it. If you really love onions, make sure there's space for it. Next step is determining your harvest amounts. So how much of each thing do I want to grow? And for us, that's pretty easy. If I need 50 units every week, I multiply my unit size by the number of, CSA shares, and I end up with a total number of pounds every week. And I'll show you an example. Then determine your harvest schedule. So plug those amounts and those crops into a calendar. So when do I want to have those crops available for my customers or for myself? And then you synthesize all of that. You take your crop mix, your harvest amounts, when you need it, and you create kind of your first draft of your planting schedule. Creating a seedling and transplant schedule, I can speak to if people have questions about it. It's not going to be a part of my example, but if you need to start anything early in the season, like indoors, we can talk about that if you've got specific questions.
Yeah.
And map it out. So place all of that information in your physical space. Like where are the tomatoes going to be planted? I need this amount. Where do they fit? And then when that is all said and done, when you have all this information and now it's attached to a map of your space, your backyard, your farm, then I encourage everybody to kind of sit with it for a minute and look at it, see if it seems doable, see if there's anything that seems like, you're stretching or like it's not, you're not using space fully. So review it, and then tweak it, make edits, and then have a solid plan for record keeping so that you're able to use that information during the season. So once the season's going, how am I going to keep, accurate information so that I have it for the next season? And then of course, all of this ends with, for us at KGD Farm, February 7th or 14th, when we start back with farming in the KGD farm greenhouse. And so planning is cyclical. So it is a never ending process. So all of these, it's not like you just go down the steps and you're done. I really want to, if I'm driving anything home, it's that we are, what do they call it? Kaizen. Kaizen is the concept of continuous improvement. So planning is really just a constant evolution of like your farm plan. So all of these things loop around back to each other. So after you're done farming, you go right back into reviewing, goal setting for the season afterwards. So here's my planning is cyclical version of my steps. Any questions about that?
Are you gonna go into some examples of how you keep records?
Yeah, I can. I linked out to the KGD farm farm plan, which will show you how we keep track of that. And we can talk about that a little later too. Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's like my last slide, but yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will tell you, it's not a perfect system, but it's a tricky one. And maybe if someone in the room has an idea of a better way to keep track of things, I'd love to hear your feedback and your ideas too. Okay. So real quick, what are the tools or resources available for people who want to plan? I'm very much an Excel spreadsheet kind of person. That's just kind of what I learned on. So, you know, that's what I've stuck with. I do a lot of things in paper. I keep, you know, a little notebook in my car. But these days there are a whole host of online platforms and also apps that you can use in order to not only like create your farm plan, but also to keep a log or keep like what we're talking about, keep records throughout the season. I unfortunately don't have a lot of experience using those. I've been really reluctant to use things like apps that that you can like keep notes on. And that's just kind of like my personal feeling about it. I also know a lot of growers who do use apps. So I have some examples down at the bottom. And at the end of this, there are links on a resource page if you want to explore any of those apps or, you know, online platforms, online management tools for creating your farm plan. And if you have any experience using some of these tools, I would love to hear back from you on how it went, what worked for you, what didn't. Some of the ones that are linked are subscription based, and some of them are through what's called open source. They're open source software things that you can download. But there are so many now, and there weren't 10 years ago, that I almost can't keep track of them. So I would love to hear reviews back from people if you are using them. That would be great.
How's everybody doing? Is that anybody, any questions up until now?
Nope, doing pretty good.
Okay, very good.
Cool. Okie doke. So we kind of just talked about spreadsheets. So I'm just going to plug Excel real quick because it's my favorite. But I love Excel because I got really good at formulas. And that's one of my favorite ways of having my spreadsheet and my farm plan do the math for me on how many seeds I need, how many bed feet, you know, harvest projections. Once you have a really good spreadsheet and you like how it feels kind of like home. I just go back to it at the end of the season and tweak it. And once you have all those formulas figured out, like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Of course, you know, online platforms also have like, you know, fancy user-friendly buttons. So, and a bunch of different, you know, some of them link to like weather data. So like clearly, like technology has gone past spreadsheeting, but I think it's a really great place for people to start. And I would love to show you as an example, the KGD farm planting plan. This is from 2019. But this gives you an idea of when I say like it feels like home, it was like set up a long time ago. It includes a whole bunch of stuff in it. This is what I'm talking about. So that's really small. Keto, should I make it bigger, a little bit bigger?
I think do the big picture first, just to like
Okay.
say what's what and like how to read it, and then zoom in.
Okay. Got it. So what I have up here, so this is a Google Doc actually. So no longer Excel, but was Excel based. So it can be shared. So all the members of the farm team have access to this. So what we're looking at right now is the planting overview. And I'm going to show you, we're going to populate one in a second, a very pared down version of this as an example. But this gives you, so up at the top, we have all the weeks of the year. And then over on the left in the columns, we have all the bed names. So we've labeled all the spaces on the farm. So this shows you, and it's color coded, when crops go in the ground, get harvested, and then get replaced by other crops throughout the season. So, you've got this kind of like this overview, this big picture view of all the things that we're planting at KGD Farm.
So can you give a few examples just to be explicit?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me zero in.
I don't know if you want to reference the map too.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, I can do map in a second. So for example, and this is a huge document. So let's see. Okay. So row 18. I don't know if you can see it. Should I zoom in some more?
I can, sure.
Okay. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay. So we look at 17. So row 17. So we've got a location of GHE, that's greenhouse E, that's a bed name, that's a label for a specific spot on the farm. So that's a bed number 5. The bed feet I actually have memorized, so it's not in here. Bed 5 is 85 feet long, but there would be a number there in there usually. And this tells me, so if I go over into the year, so I have my kind of my key up at the top. So blue tells me we're in overwintered, so crops that were planted in the fall for an early spring harvest. So anything blue is an overwintered crop. And these are carrots. So carrots are already in the ground in December because we planted them a while ago. And in between the carrot beds, while they're growing, we are, excuse me, at the same time we're growing those, we are in the greenhouse transplanting or starting our cucumbers. So we're succession crop planning. So after carrots come cucumbers, and you can see that that transplant date for the cucumbers is in the same, it's labeled in the same space. So it's under the same bed number. You can see that we're harvesting or anticipating harvesting those carrots out of the bed at the middle end of April. And then since we already have our, yep. Is there a question?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay. So we've got our transplant date, that's when we are going to start cucumbers early in the greenhouse. And then the carrots come out, and then the cucumber transplants go in early, super early for our second harvest or our second crop for that same bed space. Cucumbers grow, they grow, and then you'll see that they get replaced ultimately by a fall crop of scallions and leeks in orange. And then those scallions and leeks come out right at the end of the season. Those black bars, one at the beginning and one at the end, like bookends, that is our last frost date. So a big visual reminder, last frost date and first frost date. So anything in the middle is in the frost-free zone, and anything on the shoulders, just visually, I know that it's either going to be in the fall, it's going to be undercover or in one of the high tunnels, or in the greenhouse. So those are a couple elements to include in your farm plan. First frost date, last frost date, and yeah, definitely bed markers and labels. Massive document. If I zoom out, and you're able to see really quickly, like, okay, like we know our greenhouse space up here, we're maxed out. Every square foot is planted over the season with very few gaps, right? So we talk about planning as, you know, a way to maximize productivity. When you do this kind of like overview, especially with the color coding, you're able to see like, all right, well, that's going to be a really quick turnaround. Maybe that's not doable. You know, I've got these things really like crammed up against each other, and that's when I tend to take that like vacations. So that's going to be really problematic. Or you're able to see gaps like, oh, shoot, I have nothing to plant in that area. Like, and then you're able to, you know, increase your production by plugging something in during that time. And we also, this purple that we have, those are intentional resting spaces. So if there's a bed that we want to go fallow because it's been in production for too long, or it's got like a weed problem and we need to fix it, we also include that information on our plan as well. Anytime we're adding compost or doing soil amending, or anytime, you know, a space needs a break, because the crops aren't looking good, or like you had a lot of like, you know, pests in an area one year, also include that information in your farm plan. Now I need to go way out, I think. Oops, I did that wrong. 50%. So this is so these are all tabs in the same document, but these boxes are the farm map. Kind of hard to see, but each little rectangle is 5 feet of bed space. So this right here is field 7. 7 has 11 beds in it. And so this is how, so we made the map first, and then we made all of our beds, and then we gave each bed and field a label. So when I go to the planting overview, they correspond to these location IDs and bed numbers here on the left. So one follows from the other. You create your map, and then you use those to place all of your crops in your plan. And this is wild. So this is all the details. So this is not easy to read in the moment, but it includes all the details of production. So for example, up at the top, so when I say we have a spreadsheet with a whole bunch of formulas in it that, you know, kind of do a lot of math for us, the KGD farm plan, this is those formulas. So again, all the beds and their numbers in the fields up at the top, because these are all formulas. As I make changes, as I, you know, add more garlic to the plan, or take away, you know, the amount of lettuce I want to grow, or make changes to the crop mix, my formulas keep tabs on how much I anticipate harvesting, or will have to harvest, and like my total revenue for the season. Which is just kind of a good thing to have up at the top. So that's what that is at the top, those numbers, just to help me keep track. And over on the left, I don't know how to, or excuse me, over on the right is all of the information on, we'll go all the way over. So per crop, I'll find a good example. So for example, back in 2019, we were trialing rice in the field. So this document tells me where we were planting rice. So in field 3, when we were, so we were transplanting it out we were starting transplants week 16, we were planting it out week 20, what variety, where we got it, so what seed company. Days to maturity is really important. I'll get to that in a sec. And then specific information on how we plant these things in the field. So information like seeds or transplants per bed feet, like how close or how far apart we plant those things and how many rows per bed. And then my formulas kind of take it from there once I plug that in, and they tell me how much rice I can anticipate yielding off of that space, which is kind of down at the end.
Molly,
So,
can you explain what plant weeks, how to interpret that?
great question. Plant weeks are farmers' shorthand. It's a lot easier to say we're in week 7 than to remember that it's the week of, February 12th through the whatever. So we basically shorthand the weeks. And if you want to know what week you're in, let me see if I can do this, if it'll let me. I was going to say, if you Google week numbers 2022, it'll give you a calendar and it'll number all the weeks for you. So I think week 1 is it's the first week in January, and then it's 1 through 52, and it's just a farmer's shorthand. It makes it a little bit easier than having to plug in specific dates. And it also, to a certain extent, makes kind of copy and pasting your farm plan into next year a little bit easier too. Instead of going back and having to update all of those dates, it just makes it a little faster. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
When I say week 1, I mean the first full week in January, and then going from there. So again, like our KGD farm plan includes, information about the seeds, where they're coming from, where they're going to be planted on the farm, how they're going to be planted on the farm, like in what density, what spacing. Then my math says this is how much we need. So either, 5 pounds of spinach seed or 72 tomato transplants. It spits out a number for me. We add a 20% margin to all of those numbers, just to make sure, we have enough if pests or diseases set in, if there's crop loss. And then at the back end of this, there's yield potential numbers. So I anticipate being able to harvest this much rice at this time. And throughout the season, like when this is going, what I like about this is that you can just print off the sheets, bring them to the farm. And as you're planting things, you can actually update it with actual planting dates. So if you wanted to plant in week 16, but you ended up being in week 17, mark it down. That's something that you can use for planning next season. And I can probably share this. We're going to share the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that plan, if you want to, so the KGD farm planting plan is embedded into this PowerPoint. If you want to go through and take a look at it, you're welcome to. I think I'll make it visible to anyone who has the link. So you can give yourself kind of the self-guided tour, and then you can contact me if you have any questions about it.
And people are welcome to copy it, right?
Yeah,
Or use it as a template.
absolutely. Yep. Cool. And we also have, in order to do some of that like seed math, like where did I get the numbers for, how like yield information? How did I know how many seeds I needed per bed feet? I'm going to show you an example, but a lot of that stuff I got straight off the Johnny Selected Seed website. I'm going to show you examples, so I'm not going to go there now, but they're an incredible resource, whether you buy from them or not. Their catalog and their website is jam-packed full of helpful tools that really do take the guesswork out of this, especially if you're just starting out. It'll give you a very good ballpark of how to do yield information and planting information.
Molly, before you go on, and maybe you're going to get to this, but like it would, if possible, like you to talk about just like how to think about yield and like how do you know how much you're going to get and the reliability of the numbers that are out there and like
Yeah.
If you could talk about that. I don't know if that makes sense in the context of talking about later in your presentation or at some point.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna actually plug in some numbers in the Johnny's yield cap. Well, I'll show you where I get my like basic number, and then we can talk through some some of the issues with using that number. I guess I could talk about it now too if you want. We will
No,
get to
if
it
you're going to
though.
get to it later, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Okay, so if there aren't any questions, oh, thanks, T. If there aren't any questions, I will get into a case study, and I use my own farm. So this is my backyard. So that's a picture of my backyard right there. So when I'm not at work, I have a farm at my house. And I say farm. Ambassador Fridge Farm is a market garden. It's less than an acre. We are a City Commons collective member farm. So there are 8 or 9 of us now in the collective. We do CSA production, and also I go to the GID Saturday market every once in a while. We are also a Grown in Detroit member and have been for 6 years, something like that. You can see our high tunnel. So we are doing a full seasons of farming. We've got 8 raised beds, which you can see in the photo, cinder block with a lot of landscaping fabric. And it's just the 2 of us. Plus this year we added a third kind of like seasonal helper. So we're pretty limited on labor. So this is something that I do before work and after work and on weekends, basically. And so does my partner. We have a walk-in cooler, city lot. So like that just gives you kind of a general sense of what we do back there. And you can see our wash pack area and walk-in cooler. So we got a couple elements going on. So if I'm going through the steps, right? If I'm going through those steps from the beginning, here's what we do. Here's literally what we just did, or the things that we're working on right now for our farm plan. So step 1, set goals, think about last year. So, and some of this is true, some of this is going to be tweaked, but personal goals. I want to not be as stressed out when I'm in the backyard because it feels like I go to work and then I come back and I'm still at work. So how do I make sure that my farm plan gives me, the flexibility and the mental headspace to like not be in constant, figure it out mode. So that's a personal goal always. 20 hours a week labor goal, absolutely. Not enough hours in the day. And sales goals in generally, we're looking for somewhere around 10K a year. And that basically just pays for the cost of production and our grocery bill. So that right there for two people pretty much sums us up. And we always produce for that. Step 2, choose market outlets. So we do City Commons CSA June through November, and we do the Grown in Detroit Saturday Market August through November, or whenever I have, crop overages, basically. So number 1 priority is the CSA. Number 2 priority is the Grown in Detroit Market. And I'll say we started out growing dozens of different crops. We were primarily a cut flower farm, in fact. Prior to COVID, we did weddings and 3 dozen different varieties of flowers growing across 3 different seasons, inside the high tunnel, outside, blah, blah, blah. And that was a really, really complex farm plan. Over the past 7 years, we have pared it down to 4 crops. I feel like I'm a little self-conscious about saying that because we are getting closer and closer and closer to monocropping. Starting to feel, that doesn't feel great, but it's what's working for us. So we are primarily a carrot, tomato, and pepper farm now.
That's partially because you're in City Commons, right? Like,
yes.
and could
Yep.
you kind of give context for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in City Commons, and whenever you're working cooperatively or collectively with other growers, I assume what we do is we get together as a group in the winter and we look at the number of shares we're going to offer and what everybody grew this past season. And it's almost like a crop by crop sign up. So we go down the list, and the older members kind of get seniority and they get first pick, first dibs. And we go, okay, who's covering heirloom tomatoes this year? And then those 2 farms. Who's covering celery this year? Those 2 farms. Who's doing potatoes? Who's doing X, Y, and Z? And together we create that like a version of that colorful planting overview document that I showed you, that says, here's our list of crops and here are all the farmers who are on the hook for it. So we started out, basically doing bouquets and kind of like a hodgepodge of crops for City Commons. The longer we've been in it, the more we've kind of just committed to providing a certain amount of crop, like 4 or 5 basic crops, and for longer and longer stretches of the season. And that seems to be just like the longer you're in City Commons, the more you kind of do that. And then just making sure you have a plan to produce that amount every week reliably becomes the new challenge. So we're really not growing anything new. If anything, we're just growing more and more of less and less things. So an interesting evolution, but that's how we got there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Now, if you were, go for it.
Can I ask another question? Or
yeah.
Right, either now or at some point, can you talk about other market outlets, or like how you choose the market outlets you go to, and pros and cons, or like any like kind of like maybe challenges with like thinking you have an outlet but maybe you don't, or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this chicken and the egg thing that happens, right? It's like And I'm glad it took years to figure out my market outlets. And it's still not totally a perfect system. So it's like you gotta, try something that you're comfortable with and try something new every year until you find that like sweet spot, that mix that works for you. For some folks, it may be driven by the need to work around a normal 9 to 5 job. We see this at KGD where we offer the 3 different market outlets, where the Saturday market at Eastern Market, like the Grown in Detroit stand works for GID growers because they may have like a full-time job during the week. And then during the week, we have the KGD online store and CSA program, which works for people who are freed up during the week, but maybe don't want to go, to Saturday market at 6 o'clock in the morning. So some of that may be driven by like, if you've got like a full-time job or like a more challenging schedule. For me, we needed to basically have the season on autopilot because of time restraints. So narrowing down to very few crops or the same crops year after year means that like we're using the same equipment, we don't need any more equipment, everything gets cheaper. We're working off the same production schedule every year. We're ordering the same seeds basically every year, or we're saving our seeds. So it was a financial decision that led us to City Commons. And also there's some built-in kind of redundancy, resiliency with a collective model like that. So when I have it happened this year when my carrots didn't come through because we ended up with a really aggressive woodchuck in the backyard, there were 2 other growers that were also bringing carrots. So like instead of I missed out on, that sale through the CSA, but the CSA continued to have carrots available. So being able to do this collective growing was also a part of our decision-making process. So that we can kind of like help each other and learn from each other. And also you're less vulnerable to crop losses that way. So many things went into that decision. But I encourage everybody to try something new and kind of push yourself with your markets, but to have a strong market plan or goal in mind. Any other questions about market mix? I feel like.
I guess, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole you could go down, but I think maybe just, so we've covered, you've talked, a bit about CSA and the model there, and
Yeah.
you've talked about retail at the
Yeah.
farmers market. Would you give any, I mean, like ultimately people need to like figure out who they're going to be selling these, who they're going to sell to. And in some cases that, a lot of people are interested in wholesale or restaurants. Would you give any advice around that, or could you talk about wholesaling in restaurants and how that compares to selling at market pricing, all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yep. Oh, and how they're different. I can see a spreadsheet, I love spreadsheets, but I could see like a diagram in my mind, like all the 7 different outlets or marketing models that you just said, their pros, their cons, profitability, like weirdnesses. I mean, so much information. But if I had to like really distill them down, Saturday market, because we work with chefs there too. Saturday market is great if you want to have max flexibility in what you're bringing and get a lot of customer feedback. So if you're new and you want to know what people are interested in growing, Saturday market is a great place. In terms of profitability, working with restaurants, especially if you have a really good relationship or you're building and you're very consistent with your, like sales, building relationships with specific restaurants is good for that, because oftentimes chefs will give you a list of things they're interested in getting from you and when. I'll say that's like closer to a rule than an exception. Chefs really like when you're very consistent and when you have a certain amount of volume to make it worth their while. But building those relationships, I mean, they'll come back to you year after year if you do a good job. And if you key up with a couple chefs, that could be all the produce you grow in 1 or 2 relationships.
But I would say the caveat there would be that it needs to be somebody who understands the seasonality of growing vegetables, and that you aren't going to be you can only give them tomatoes between July and October, and
Absolutely.
So it needs to be an understanding, like if they have that thing on their menu that they want such and such for, they're not going to be able to do that all year round.
Yep, exactly. And so I say it's, more like a rule than an exception, but my hesitance is because the same chefs that tend to court small, sustainably grown, small scale, sustainable growers in the city also tend to be the most, I don't want to say volatile, but like the most like they don't have, like they like to change their menus regularly, and they tend to be a little inconsistent in their needs. So it's like you oftentimes in Detroit anyways, I found you find a chef who's like super into working with you, but then they want, one thing, one moment, and then they want something else, another moment, and like you don't have it, and they want, this and what. So, super thrilled to work with you, but also can be changeable in like their needs. So premeditating needs with the same chefs that tend to work with small scale growers can be challenging. So if you're really flexible and find good chefs who are also willing to be flexible, like that's the sweet spot. And I think the only way we've been able to make it work is by having those really strong relationships, like chefs who you can text at 1 o'clock in the morning and keep up to date regularly with what's coming out of the field and what their needs are. I could talk all day about how to satisfy wholesale markets, but high profitability, but can be inconsistent. What else did you say? So that's wholesale. We covered market, Saturday market. Really, really good for customer feedback and for max flexibility. You can bring, especially at the Grown in Detroit table, you can bring whatever you have that's seasonal. Like, you're not on the hook for certain crops at certain times. The KGD online store. So if you're going to do some sort of e-commerce, like you sell certain things online and then people pick it up a week later or several days later, is great for streamlining the whole sales process. So you're not harvesting things that aren't going to be sold, or could not sell. You're only ever harvesting what has already sold. So the pro is that, it decreases labor and streamlines labor. But the other side of that is that you have to be really, really good at forecasting what you're growing. So you have to be able to say a week in advance, I will absolutely have 10 pounds of tomatoes to sell, 30 pounds of cherry tomatoes to sell, da 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 da. And that's, I consider that a fairly advanced skill. What other pros and cons? CSA is probably my favorite. All the money you need to grow up front, a regular harvest schedule. In City Commons, case, it's a collective model. So even when there are crop losses, we always double up on crops. So someone else's farm is able to cover on the same crop. So we don't have big losses. We all know what we're growing, in advance. But I will say it's fairly labor intensive to put boxes together and then get them to people. And there's a lot of communication with customers involved with that too, in planning. So it takes, 3 or 4 of us a lot of hours to manage City Commons and do the administration piece. So pros and cons everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
That's my dissertation on market models. I feel like we should all just have a big conversation, a big brain dump on what works and what doesn't. Okay, whoop, okay. So getting back to my case study, we got our goals, we know our market outlets. We'll just pretend like we already had our meeting with everybody where they said, yep, you're growing carrots, heirloom tomatoes, and peppers this year. And this is when we need them. So my crop mix is already established. So the next step is to set my harvest amounts. So how much of this do I need to grow and when? And for this, for the purpose of like moving things along, I'm just going to focus on carrots because it's easy. If you guys have questions about peppers or tomatoes, I'm more than happy to talk about it, but we're just going to focus on carrots right now. So our crop mix says that we need to produce, City Commons tells us we need to do 25 units a week of carrots in June for 4 weeks. So a total of 150 pounds, something about. And that 150, yeah. So, and in the fall, again, we need to do 2 rounds of carrots in the spring and in the fall. That's the total amount that we need per round. At City Commons, a unit of carrots is 1.5 pounds. And again, this math is just like perfect for demonstration purposes. So we need 150 pounds for June to satisfy the need and another 150 pounds for September. So I have another version of this, but for this demonstration, you can see I've started to populate on the bottom a kind of mock planting plan. So the first thing I did, carrot harvest schedule. I've got the months of the year out, and green for me that's a harvest window. So June, I need 150 of carrots, September, 150 of carrots. Okay. Set my planting. So once I know when and how much I need, now I'm going to start plugging in some dates, like some actual dates. And this is also, this has more to do, I didn't have this on I had a slide came off, but I was going to talk about how I selected, like, how did I arrive at Romance F1 pelleted carrot seed, right? Because that's a really specific crop selection for that. So Keto, do I have time to like talk about that for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for this example, so carrots, not all created equally. Some carrots are better for spring sowing, main crop sowing, fall production, or overwintering. Johnny's Johnny's Seeds online actually has a carrot diagram that shows you which of at least their varieties that they offer is best suited for each growing season. So I was looking at, okay, like what's a common use carrot where I can buy one kind of seed and have it satisfy my needs for both June and September. And I did some research on carrots for too long. And then I got this variety actually recommended to me by fellow Detroit growers. And that is how I ended up with this variety. It's a main season variety and it's pelleted. So it comes like each seed, carrot seeds are so tiny. It comes in like a little like ball of clay, each individual seed. And they're a little more expensive when you buy them like that. But it does mean that I'm able to use a seeder that, you know, picks them up and then spaces them really appropriately. So we figured that it was actually a labor and cost savings to buy the more expensive seed, because this year was the first year where I didn't actually have to thin carrots at all, which was great. That's usually not the case. So and with the all season, you know, solid grower, a hybrid carrot, and oh, thank you. Dinner just showed up, sorry. And that's where we got that, and pelleted so that it's easy to plug in the ground. The big thing for the big thing that you need to pull off the website in order to figure out your carrot planting schedule is the days to maturity. So the amount of time that it takes for a newly seeded carrot to be marketable. And for this variety, it is 70 days. So I hope this works. So if we look down at the bottom, so I'm trying to figure out when I need to plant these things. So from the Johnny's website, I know that the days to maturity is 70 days for these seeds that I bought. And I know that my the first harvest date for City Commons, these carrots, the first date where I need them is June 3rd. So then I can either count backwards in the calendar to March 25th, which is when I need to put them in the ground. So purple means that that's a sow date. Or I can go to this amazing website. So this is the Johnny Selected Seeds Growers Library, the thing I was talking about earlier. This is an excellent resource. And if you're trying to figure out when, so I know I need them harvested here. And if you're trying to figure out when you need to plant them, they have a calculator for that. So you go to the planning tools and calculators. And then you go to target, it's in the plant area. You go to target harvest date calculator. And then you download it. Can you still see that, Guido?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And then follow the instructions. So over on the left, I'm gonna write in 6/3/2022. So this is my event is I need to harvest these things. And actually, did I say 6263? Something like that. And if you plug in carrot with the variety romance.
Oh, you wait, I don't see the calculator right now.
Oh, it's not going? Okay, let me
think you
stop
need to-
sharing and share the right thing. Cool, share. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I just downloaded this off the website. So you can see that I plugged in, oops. Let's see, I'll plug in my date of 6/03/2022 on the left. I've got carrot romance in there. It already knows that it's 70 days because it's a Johnny's variety. And then you'll see over here, all the way to the end, it automatically spits out a planting date for you. So if you order a bunch of things off of Johnny's, or if you want to set up something similar like this for yourself, this is another one of those formulas that I put into the KGD farm planting plan. This is a good way, instead of going through the calendar, to try and count backwards, creating a formula for yourself or using this tool saves you a bunch of time. So that's where I got that March 25th date, is by using this this first planting day calculator off the website. Oop. Okay, scooting back. Okie dokie. Toggle. Cool. Oh, and I did the same thing for my second sowing. So I needed these, or my second round of carrots. So I needed the second round to be available for harvest in September. And I counted back, or I used the calculator, and it spit out a date of June, I think it was 23rd. So that fills that out. So now we've got our planting windows, our harvest windows. They're all on the same spreadsheet. I have my variety identified. I know how many days to maturity it takes, all that information. So the next step is to place them in the field. And how do I do that? So you're going to grab more information off of the Johnny's website, which we'll go to now. If I need 150 pounds for June, I'm going to go here. So this is we talked about so this was the point where we were going to talk about yield calculations. Like, can you trust the numbers that you get on the, front page or the second page of the Johnny Seed catalog? Like, where do things get wonky sometimes? So I'll say that this is a good place to start. This will give you like a pretty good average for yield numbers. So what I did as a starting point was I went to this yield chart. So you'll see we've got the kinds of crops. Everything is based off of a 100-foot row, because the bulk of the people buying seeds from Johnny's are doing acres and acres of a certain crop. For backyard gardeners, you have to do a little bit of math to turn that 100 row feet into something on the scale of like your backyard raised beds. So it's a little bit tricky. So you got to take that and divide it by, the 8 feet if you have an 8-foot by 4-foot raised bed. But you can do it. So what I did was I went down to the carrot entry. And for every 100 feet of row, not bed space, but row spacing. So a single line of plants, right? Not a total bed, single line of plants that's 100 feet long. I can anticipate getting 150 pounds out of it. Shocking. I love it when the math checks out. So I know from this that I should ballpark it and say, okay, cool. I'm going to need at least 100 row feet in order to satisfy both my June and again, my September needs in terms of carrot yield, if that makes sense. And also for my seed order, this says that in order to produce that much, I need 3,000 seeds. So when I'm taking that number 2 and I'm adding it to a growing seed order list. And if I need to do 150 pounds twice a year, I need to double that. So I need to order not 3,000 seeds, but I need to order 6,000 seeds in order to plant everything and have the yield numbers that I need for both plantings. Okay. So I take that 100 feet. So I need, for each planting, I need 100 row feet. Okie dokie.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a second. What did I miss?
No, you're okay. Just on that sheet, it said that you will, if spaced appropriately, which is 1 inch spacing for seeds. That's more information I got off of the seed packet that came with this Romance F1 pelleted seed variety I bought. If you space them at 1 inch apart, you're going to need roughly 3,000 seeds to purchase 3,000 seeds. And you'll be able to yield 150 pounds of carrots, which meets my needs perfectly.
So question,
Yes.
this is like a really good example to give you, like, to get in the kind of train of thought. So can we just like look at the inverse of that for a second? So
Yeah.
and say City Common CSA is asking that I plant 150 pounds of carrots. How much area do I need to do that?
Totally. Yep. That is, yeah. Okay. So that's actually what this is. So at the bottom of this, is it shared?
No,
Oops. Okay.
you were shared. You just went off your screen share just before I jump back.
Is it back?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. So I know I need 100 feet per sowing. So if you look at the bottom, fortunately I have, yeah, we built raised beds that were 35 feet long by 4.5 feet wide, because we get at least 100 feet, row feet out of each bed. So we like based our actual like layout of our backyard area on our general needs for production. So our beds are perfectly sized for carrot production, and that was totally intentional. But how did I arrive at that spacing? This is actually really important information. Because basically we figure, so 100 feet, we put three rows in each bed. So 3 times 35 gives us 100 row feet plus some margin in each one of our beds. In some years, I actually put 4 rows of carrots in each bed, which gives us even more margin to make it, absolutely to 150 pounds out of each bed. And how did I arrive at that? More math. So Romance carrots, if you go, so if you're not familiar with the Johnny's seed website, there's a whole bunch of like pricing information up here, but at the bottom is an incredible amount of growing info that you also need to write down. So over here on the left, that's where I got the 70 days to maturity number that helped me create my like seeding and harvest windows, my bookends on the season. And then down here in the planting information area, I got when to plant, but also right here, this 3/4 of an inch apart. Like that's how many, you use that information to figure out how many seeds you actually need and how much you can actually fit in there. And then this is even more important, the row spacing of 16 to 24 inches apart for your carrot rows. And with 4-foot beds, we figure we can get 3 like really kind of squeezing them in. 3 or sometimes 4, they grow okay. That was a trial and error thing. 4 rows per bed. So we were effectively able to triple the length of our bed. And if our bed is 35 feet, we're ending up with 105 row feet. So that gets us well over our 150 pounds per 100 row feet of space. So that is how I got there. Any questions about that? That's some math. So bed A, labeled bed A, is 35 feet long, and with 3 rows, I've got 105, am I doing that right? 105 bed feet, which is more than enough to satisfy 1 planting. And then B is the same size, and that's going to be my September planting, to end up with this. So down at the bottom, this is what like a version of our farm plan looks like. So we've got, you know, labeled up, I've got over on the side, I've got, you know, a bed label of A, first round, how I'm going to sow them. So I'm going to sow them in 3 rows. Seed spacing is going to be 1 inch. They're going to go in on this date, and I use the seeding calculator to create that date. And then they're going to come out 25 pounds at a time, each of the 4 weeks in June. And then the same for the second round. And that is where I pulled all of that information from in order to populate my planting entries just for those 2 rounds of carrots. Questions about that?
Did that yield calculator, did that give you the seed spacing on there automatically? Maybe I missed that part.
Yeah, so I can go back out to it. There's another, in the grower library, there's more information on seed spacing that like, you know, like it gives you broad stroke seed spacing. A lot of this honestly is just in my head at this point. It's just in my head from doing it. And even some of my seed spacing is like a tweak. So, you know, over the years, I've learned that like, I don't like thinning. So I tend to space my carrots a little like farther apart instead of like sowing a really thick band. You know, some of that is just like built up in my head over the years, but what I started with was going to, and I think it's up now, going to the Johnny's website once I've zeroed in on what crops I want to grow, and going down to this growing information page, and then reading the information about it. And the same information is in the Johnny's seed catalog. In fact, the first and second page of the Johnny seed catalog, there are a whole bunch of tables with all this information, just like shorthand, including that like yield estimator. It's a table right on page 4 of the Johnny seed catalog. So if you get the print version, you can, you know, just rip that page out and keep it forever on your refrigerator. But down here in the planting area, that's so planting information for this variety, it says 3/4 of an inch apart seed spacing, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep, in rows 16 to 24 feet or inches, excuse me, apart. So you can pull that information right off of the Johnny's website. Or, for example, if you're getting seeds from the Garden Resource Program, this information is also, Akello and the GRP team put this information on all the seed packets that you get in your GRP distribution stuff, as well as a guide, the Plan Your Garden guide, right? Which
Yep.
gives you all that information, when to plant, how to plant, and what spacing. So we digest all of that for you, for whatever crops you're going to end up getting from us. So if you're going it alone, yeah.
I was
Cool.
saying it seemed like because you said you had the 100 feet, you had the 100 row feet or bed feet.
Yep.
And that was gonna give you 150 pounds. So I mean, is that like already calculated the like the thinning out and stuff like that? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So that 150, I've found through experience is because I'm busy, because we've been in like really hot years, because the last couple have been really challenging for cold crops. I see that as kind of a lofty number. I think for the past couple of years, 150 pounds in Detroit off of 100 row feet is, for me, it's been, knowing my notes, it's been lower than that reliably most years. Some of that is because I don't have time to water them all the time, and it's totally my fault that I don't get the highest yields I should. But some of that also is weather, I don't know, other things. So what I like to do is to add margin to it. So for example, like in our beds, sometimes I'll add a 4th row in there, just in case. So instead of planting 3 rows per bed, I plant 4, or I plant half bed entirely just to make sure we've got it. And if we have overages, they go to another one of my outlets. And if we, meet it perfectly, we meet it perfectly, our numbers for city commons. But I like to add a buffer of 15 to 20% more seed or transplants going in the ground than what the Johnny's website is telling me. But that's a number that I kind of like had to kind of swirl around myself. Yeah, trial and error informed my 15 to 20% margin on that number. Thanks, T. That was a really good question. Cool. 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 We've already kind of talked about record keeping, but like how to keep records, what platforms, paper, Excel, web-based or app-based too, go for it. But in terms of like what you should be capturing, make sure that you are recording actual planting dates. So you always have the best intentions with your planting dates, but stuff happens, like weather or a vacation or whatever. So make sure you're recording your actual seeding dates, your actual first harvest dates, your actual yield numbers. Because again, that's how I over the years kind of arrived at that, like, I need to plant 20% more of, just to make sure I'm there with my numbers. And also to keep track of other like cultural things, like, are diseases taking hold in the field? Like, do we have pest issues? Like, we suddenly this year have rat issues in the high tunnel. Like, that's brand new. Something to think of for next season. And also, if you're trying a new variety, taste test it, get customer feedback. If they don't like it or you don't like it, make sure you take note of that and don't grow the same thing twice if it's not very good or isn't marketable. And also, of course, anytime you do soil work, treat the soil that you're working on like it is another one of these crops. Like, make an actual entry in your plan that is just soil management. So like right with the carrots and the tomatoes, do farm soil and have a seasons plan where it's, I'm going to add amendments, I'm going to do soil sampling, so that it's in there and it's not an afterthought. Because really, if you don't have good, healthy, quality soils, all of this is kind of moot, right? So make sure that you're doing good soil care as part of your planning. and a ton of questions, I'm sure. Also
Okay.
resources.
Oh, great. Um, so I had a few other things that I thought might be helpful to tease out. But before I get into that, want to open it up if you'd like to unmute yourself or type in the chat if there's any questions, or if you if there's anything in particular that you want to get any more information about, please speak up. Feel free to unmute yourself. Anybody? Loretta?
Yes, what'd you say?
Oh, I
None?
just wondered, I thought I heard a sound from you. I just wondered if you had any questions.
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay. All right, y'all. Well, so I guess a few things that I thought would be helpful to get a little bit more clarity about, or just like to flush out a little bit more. Were like, how do you go about? So could you talk about pricing and like maybe reference a little bit about, like, we do pricing for Grown in Detroit, and maybe that's a good place to start, but like, how do you know what's worthwhile to plant? Like, potatoes are awesome and they're high calorie crops, and that you could sustain your family on them, but I'm not sure if that would be necessarily something that you would want to dedicate a lot of your field to, as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up. I'm gonna screen share that guy. So how is it worth it? Well, one, I feel like at a baseline, growing your own food, like, the amount of money is just, one metric. And unless you're going to commit to a fair amount of labor and administrative time and what have you, like, it's a lot of hauling for the money. Absolutely. But there is always that thing that I have to remind myself of, is that, like, the culture of farming, like, there are a lot of, like, other, like, what do I want to say? Cultural, spiritual, health-wise benefits to doing this work. So I can definitely talk about money, but in general, like, I've found that it's an incredible amount of work for the money, but when you factor in all the other benefits of agriculture, like being more in tune with, the growing community, and, the weather and your own body, and being engaged all the time, like living seasonally, talking about food culture, like, yeah, it's ultimately a profit, right? Like, it's a good thing to do. But in terms of money, like, if we want to just, like, start with that one metric, what is shared with you right now is a document that we update every spring as part of Grown in Detroit. This is our master produce price list. We tweak it every year based on kind of like market forces. And this is available. Is it available? If it's not, it's definitely going to be shared with this presentation, but GID growers get a copy of this. This is all the crops that we have ever grown within reason, the unit size and how it's packaged, how it's stored, and then the price per unit. So if you ever do a bit of research on what is most marketable, this document is a good starting point. We use this document as kind of a starting point for our conversations at City Commons. I've seen it used elsewhere. This takes into account what's going on and what people will buy at Saturday market, as well as kind of like in the wholesale realm. It's my best guess based on all of my market research of what things should sell for. If I had to plug, you want me to plug some specific crops?
Sure. I was just like, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you had narrowed those down for yourself, but like,
How did I get there?
yeah, I mean, and I know there's a lot of information that gets you there in terms of like, it's going to be unique in Detroit to other cities, and it's going to be unique in,
True.
There's a lot of, it depends, but
True. Yeah, I think so. What were the factors? One was time, big time. Two was how enjoyable is this? Like, do I enjoy growing these things? Also, do I have a resource that maybe my other cooperative growers don't have that makes me like specifically suited to growing these things? For example, a high tunnel means that I have tomatoes for a much longer period. So like that made my farm unique, and made our ability to give CSA members tomatoes like, way bigger, right? Much longer period of time. So that your space can be a limiting factor. Again, what you like to grow. If you really like growing herbs, do it. If you are a beekeeper, do it. So where I started was flowers because it like made me happy. And in general, not only did it make me happy, but it was also one of the most, per square foot of growing space, one, and still is one of the most profitable crops you can grow. Highly temperamental, super crazy market, but on a per square foot basis, one of the most profitable things. But unfortunately, it's not food. So if that's part of your mission, then that's not an option for you. So it was a mix of like personal, cultural knowledge based, and then what the market will bear. I think if I could have anyone increase any of these offerings in any measure, it would be fruit. Thinking about tree fruit, brambles, berries like strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. The local market can't get enough of those, and anytime we have them, they sell out immediately. So of course, with trees, you always want to have planted them 10 years ago, but I would encourage folks to do anything they can to increase their fruit and tree fruit production, for sure. And probably a million other things. Grown in Detroit, being in Detroit and being around Saturday market and talking to customers, talking to chefs, seeing literally what sells on the table every Saturday. Those are all things that inform crop mix. And that is how over the past 7 years, I've really gone from a million things to 3 things. It was, many different voices, many different factors. But I am happy to do for anyone who wants to talk about this. In fact, at the GID grower meeting that's happening on December 15th, all the members of Grown in Detroit are getting this kind of like report from me on what sold when and how much and how profitable it was. So that's like the end of, I'm working on it now, the end of year. Like, these are all the trends. Like, this is my hot list. This is my, maybe we grow less of this. So that's happening December 15th. That's for Grown in Detroit growers.
Okay.
And I do that every year.
Great.
Yeah.
There is a request. The links that are on the last slide.
Yeah.
Could you copy those into the chat?
Oh, yeah.
And then there were a couple templates that you had used, and if we could, so you're gonna share your slides
Yep.
and the GID price chart. If you could just drop those in an email to me, maybe just when we get off, and then I can make sure that folks get those with the email after the class.
Should I copy and paste these links here into the email?
I would do both. If you could put them in the chat for folks who are here right now, and then you can put them in the email in the email to me as well, and then I'll make sure that a few people have logged off, so I can make sure that everybody who was in the class tonight can get them.
Okay. Let me come back to the chat function. Here we go. Okay, there are the links to farm management tools.
Great.
And I'll send you an email right now.
Okay.
Cool.
So with that, if anybody had any questions yet, or we could wrap things up for the night. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'll just give you one last sec to, if anybody had any questions, or if you have any questions, you can also, I'll be emailing you with information from the class. And if you have any follow-ups with me or Molly, I can help connect you. And otherwise, thanks everybody for coming out. Molly, nice work. And we will see you guys at the next one. Oh, let's see. Wait, hold on. All right. Lots of thank yous. All right, we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Good night, Molly.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See you in a week.
Yeah, right. See you next Wednesday.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.